Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to welcome you to today's webinar, Preventing Youth Violence and Building Resiliency Through Employment, Resources for Local Communities. My name is Callie Murray, and I am with OJJDP's National Training and Technical Assistance Center. As your host, I would like to take a couple of minutes to discuss a few features of Adobe Connect, which will help you maximize your opportunity to participate in today's webinar. To download a copy of the PowerPoint slides, as well as the presenter bios and photos, locate the Handouts pod directly above the chat area. Click on the name of the file, then click the Download button to save it to your computer. To send a chat message, click the menu icon in the upper right corner of the chat pod. Choose Start Chat With, then select Host, Presenters, or Specific Attendees. Type your message into the chat box, and please include the city that you were from so we can sort the questions out that way. And then hit Enter or click the message bubble icon to send. For those of you participating in today's webinar as a group, please take a minute and help us count. Go to the chat window and type in the total number of additional people in the room with you today. This will help us with our final count. Again, if you're viewing with a larger group, please type in the number of additional people joining you today. If you are viewing by yourself, there's no need to type anything at this time. The webinar learning objectives for today are as follows. Identify promising local employment policy and practice trends for at-risk youth and young adults. Describe essential principles and program elements of the federally funded, highly successful YouthBuild initiative. Increase understanding of federal policies that support employment strategies at the local level, with particular attention to changes in law from WIA and WIOA. And finally, identify helpful local and national resources. I will now turn it over to Jerema Voigt with OJJDP. Jerema?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining the webinar today. This is Jerema Voigt with the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention out of the Department of Justice. And I won't take up too much time today, but I did want to welcome everyone for joining us, and just to note that the concerns around youth employment and how that employing youth and assisting with reducing violence and preventing violence in the communities across the country is a big issue for a number of communities that we serve. Our main initiatives through the National Forum on Youth Violence Prevention, as well as the Community-Based Violence Prevention and Defending Childhood initiatives. So we look forward to the information that will be presented today, and we also look forward as your partners here at OJJDP advancing the work and the knowledge that you all need to enhance your strategies to prevent youth violence. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bastian with DSG to get the webinar started.
Thank you, Jeroma, and I want to thank Callie for all your work and help in setting this up, and really thank everyone on the call, all the participants that are taking time to join us for this discussion, and hopefully to share your thoughts, your questions, and any input you have in the next hour and a half. My name is Bastian. I'm the project director here at DSG. We are together with NTTAC and OJJDP, we are co-hosting this webinar. And I thought what I'd do is start off with really what drives us and what DSG's overall modus operandi is when it comes to working with OJJDP and working in this area of youth violence prevention. And DSG's cooperative agreement with OJJDP through a vehicle of the grant of Youth Violence Prevention Coordinated Training and Technical Assistance really tries to do a few things. One is to aim to improve individual quality of life, safety, enhance local structures and systems, and support work in communities and cities that elevates the work that you all are doing on a national level. What's important to note is that what you're doing on a daily basis in neighborhoods and in your cities, we try to, as best as we can, weave a fabric across all this work, or put together a frame that really pulls all of your work together to provide a national voice. DSG's work in the area of youth violence prevention is in the following ways. What we do is we align the youth violence prevention efforts and our work across 3 initiatives that Jerome just mentioned, the National Forum for Youth Violence Prevention, Community-Based Violence Prevention, and Defending Childhood. We do so by also maximizing the limited resources and leveraging other resources, other funds, to be able to buttress the work that's happening in local communities. We leverage expertise from various initiatives in various cities to be able to share with their cohorts in other cities. We work to strengthen partnerships at the local level, at state and regional levels, and obviously we leverage the relationship we have with the federal government as well. We work to engage all stakeholders in various communities, from youth serving organizations, from hospitals, from business organizations, from philanthropies. We try to really maximize our efforts to try and ensure that the full breadth of resources available to the sites are available, and we provide technical assistance through a wide range of modalities. And the webinar in today's webinar is an example of that. What brought us to today is a few months from January until June, DSG undertook a needs assessment with 39 sites across the country that are a part of OJJDP's Youth Violence Prevention Strategy. We did a twofold process. One was an online needs assessment with all 39 sites, and we followed the online needs assessment with follow-up with phone calls to each site to really probe on a more deeper level to understand what are some of the key issues, what are some of the strengths, what are some of the weaknesses, and to get a better understanding of the issues and the landscape in their communities. And all 3 OJJDP youth violence prevention initiatives indicated that poverty and economic issues or economic stress were among the salient issues that they're working with at some level. They also mentioned in the needs assessment that employment and economic opportunities was a protective factor, and that they wanted to find more information or more resources of what else can be available, what else can they leverage that they can share with their stakeholder partners and with their clients. So the follow-up interviews indicated that sites really wanted more TA around youth job creation, expanding youth employment opportunity, breaking down barriers, and really looking at reentry and a whole host of issues that dealt with employment, that dealt with leveraging resources, and that really looked at economic climate and how do we in this kind of a climate, how can you leverage more resources? So our TA today, our webinar today, begins with the subject of youth employment and resources available, because that was, as I mentioned earlier, one of the key needs that sites identified. On a bi-monthly basis, we'll be hosting a series of webinars on other issues, but for the month of October and November, we're going to be focusing on economic issues. And with that, what I'd like to do is I'd like to turn the discussion over to our distinguished moderator, Mr. Jack Calhoun. Mr. Calhoun is an advisor for DSG in a number of different areas that deal with youth violence prevention, and is also the president and CEO of Hope Matters. Mr. Calhoun has dedicated truly his entire life's work to improving the lot of children and families and communities. In 2007, Jack worked under the aegis of the National League of Cities Institute for Youth, Education, and Families, designed and ran something called the California Cities Prevention Network, which was a 13-city initiative that sought to foster development, implementation, and put together a comprehensive citywide anti-violence plan that leveraged prevention, intervention, enforcement, and reentry strategies. Ultimately, that entity was the basis for what the Justice Department later created as the National Forum on Youth Violence Prevention. Jack Calhoun's founded and directed 2 major nonprofit entities, the Justice Resource Institute and the National Crime Prevention Council. And for 20 years, he served as the CEO of the National Crime Prevention Council. So it's truly my distinguished honor to introduce Jack, who's going to be facilitating today's call.
Thank you very much, Beth. Thanks, Jeroma and Callie, for setting this up, and to all of you on the call. I'm delighted to do this for two reasons. There are probably more, but two prime ones. The issue of youth employment, unemployment is so salient, especially for those on the edge, those who've dropped out, who've been involved in the juvenile justice system, and so critical to you working with kids on the local issue. Makes a difference totally in terms of their life chances. Second reason I'm delighted is because we have such an extraordinary panel. Friends on the call, they are peerless. Throughout the nation, we could not have found better. And one of them from Massachusetts, YouthBuild, Dorothy, has two young people on the phone with her whom she will introduce when she speaks. In style, the objectives are two. You have the learning objectives around practice, local practice and trends, description of YouthBuild, federal policies that support such effort, and identification of local and national resources. In style, although it's very difficult given this medium of a webinar, I want us to feel that we're really exchanging around the table as much as we can. Each speaker will have 10 minutes, followed by 3 minutes where they will comment on each other's comments. You, as they are speaking, will submit your questions as indicated. We're going to hold those to the end. You all will have about an hour, so it's going to get very rich. If there's an absolutely burning question that needs clarification earlier than that, we will hear it. So, without further ado, I want to introduce Andy Moore, who is Director of Youth, Young Adult Connections at the National League of Cities, Institute for Youth Education and Families, which is an action tank helping municipal leaders take action on behalf of children, youth, and families. Recently launched a new initiative to connect kids to nature. He supports a growing network of dropout re-engagement centers. He led an exploration and leads of municipal leadership roles in juvenile justice reform. And he assists with local partnerships focused on increasing post-secondary attainment rates. Before that, he spent 15 years building the nationwide network of service and conservation corps. And on a personal note, a valued partner of mine, as together we created and guided the California Cities Violence Prevention Network. Andy, welcome. You're on, man.
Thanks, Jack, and thanks, friends at OJJDP and DSG. It's a pleasure and an honor to be on the phone and over the cyberspace today with leading lights such as Dorothy, Jennifer, Jack, and Bass. So without further ado, I just want to talk about opportunities to build stronger linkages between local violence prevention efforts and local youth employment efforts. And for some folks today, we're likely listening in to a prior discussion in which I encapsulated two recent useful frameworks from based on research and looking at effective youth employment programs around the country, and together the output from our colleagues at MDRC in New York and Heartland Alliance national initiatives in Chicago really, I think, converge around some very similar areas about the importance of paid work and incentives, the importance of linking education, training, and the labor market, the local labor market, where the high-growth jobs are, addressing developmental needs of young people, and thinking about sequencing experiences accordingly, providing support services in part through staff who fulfill the promise of youth development and build trusting relationships with youth, continuity of support over time, and increasingly educating employers as to the value and techniques for hiring youth and keeping them in their jobs. So think of these frameworks as important background or checklists that anyone could use at the local level to help answer the question, are we putting together a program or are we talking to a program that offers a high quality mix of services and supports for young people. So from my standpoint here, working with cities around the country and my role sitting on the board of the National Youth Employment Coalition, I'm going to make some less scientific observations about the major current and ongoing concerns in the youth employment field. You'll hear more from top flight resource Jennifer Kemp about implementation ongoing now of the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. Three major aspects to perhaps pay attention to. One is the new requirement to spend 75% of local funds on out-of-school youth. This is groundbreaking, represents a major shift in federal policy, a new set of performance measures, and new requirements, such as the requirement to build in financial education to youth employment programming. So big topic of discussion, lots of local experimentation and early implementation experience. It's a good time for those who haven't been closely involved with their local workforce boards and workforce agencies to get into the discussion to say, how can we participate, how can we help meet your goals and performance measures. Ongoing concerns about over the last many years about program quality and the need to refer to some list of promising and effective practices and really make sure that one is not, quote unquote, reinventing the wheel, but rather ascribing to best and promising practices. Scale is an ongoing concern. It's illustrated by the fact that whereas we would want to encourage close working partnerships and kind of a coordinating role for local workforce boards, the amount of federal money on the table to serve it would only reach 5 to 10% of the eligible population. So there's a huge need for creativity and blending and braiding of funds in order to reach more young people with employment-related services. And last but not least is really something that's now enshrined in the law that's been a matter of discussion for a number of years, and that is that a first job is not enough, a high school diploma is not enough, that we really need to be about putting young people on career pathways, and almost every pathway these days is going to require some sort of post-secondary certification if we want our young people to move into jobs that have a hope of earning a family-sustaining wage. So confirmation of what the challenging issues are for the youth employment field come from a recent survey jointly conducted by the National Association of Workforce Boards and the National Youth Employment Coalition. So your colleagues in the field or some of you on the phone, or the response says that concerns are about recruiting sufficient numbers of out-of-school youth to reach that, to make sure that you're spending 75% of local funds on that population, developing appropriate program models that speaks to the the quality considerations, finding enough organizations to deliver services that maybe there's a mismatch in some cases locally between who's got the experience serving out-of-school youth and what the needs are, and then meeting the new performance requirements under WIOA. One key resource I want to connect folks up with on program quality is all the experience represented in an initiative of the National Youth Employment Coalition called PEPNET, or Promising and Effective Practices for Youth Programs. So this is a field-informed, field-normed list of program practices organized around quality standards in 4 areas: management, the programmatic approach, youth development competencies, and a focus on the results for youth. So on the website, which somehow got minimized here, there are ample examples and processes that one can use to conduct a self-evaluation of a program or move forward in that quality direction. Because of this growing conversation around linking up more closely with employers who, in addition to the historically public sector employers and programs such as YouthBuild, which you'll hear about from Dorothy, have played a key role in providing these first job experiences. There's more organizing these days around the idea of what would it take for more private sector employers to play a lead role in providing that first job or a job at a key point for a young person. And the Grads of Life campaign, which you can read more about at gradsoflife.org, is designed to basically make the sale to employers as to why they would want to consider working with a broader group of young people and take the small risk involved in hiring people with less experience. I'm afraid that in the reformatting we may have lost some of this website here, but it should be available at gradsoflife.org. I wanted to suggest a critical learning opportunity and resource for folks on the line. If by hook or by crook you could get to Washington, D.C. on November 18th, the National Youth Employment Coalition will hold a youth employment policy convening to hear from federal officials and national experts and field representatives from across the country. As, again, an opportunity to learn more about current discussions and to go deeper into some of the topics we'll be touching on today. In thinking about what to present today, I did come across a nice example of the range of activities at one locality. It happens to be Pittsburgh. And it may not be indicative of what everyone is doing, but it's a thoughtful approach that lists the variety of ways that the Pittsburgh Workforce Investment Board and partners such as the City of Pittsburgh are seeking to put young people to work and connect them up with supports to stay employed. So that's an item for future reference as far as what all could be going on in one community. So with that, shall I turn it back to you, Bass, and let you, or Jack, and let you introduce Dorothy?
Sure, Andy, thanks for being a good steward of time. Just watch your term, hook or crook. This is a violence prevention situation, my friend. No, I'm only teasing you, obviously. Point of clarification, under major and current ongoing concerns, you indicated 75% spending on out-of-school youth. Does that imply dropout alone, or can it be a high school grad who's at loose ends, who hasn't connected either with college or with job, or is it exclusively dropout?
Yeah, good point, good question, and it could be either. And in fact, Boston is an example of a city that recently looked at its out-of-school youth or so-called opportunity youth population and learned to its surprise that it has more young people in the category of holding a high school diploma and still out of work than it has typical dropouts. So that's definitely a group worth consideration.
Thank you. Collegial comments. Dorothy, Jen, any comments on what Andy has indicated before we move on to Dorothy?
This is a quick question from Dorothy, following up on your question, and that is, does the eligibility for that 75% in WIOA take income into account? Is there a low income requirement or not on that, Andy?
Good question.
I think I'll reserve the detailed answer for Jen, but overall.
Go ahead, Jen.
I can help you, Andy, with that one, and I'll get more into the details under my presentation. For some of the categories, income is applicable. For juvenile justice, for court-involved folks, it doesn't come into play. So youth who have been involved with the juvenile justice system in school or out-of-school youth, for this conversation, we're focusing on the out-of-school youth. It's not a factor.
Great.
Andy, on that list of, when in your opener, the linkages, developmental needs, trusting adults, continuity, work with employers, which in your experience throughout the country with all the programs you've seen, all the initiatives, seem to be the most difficult for local sites to tackle and where they seem to need the most technical assistance?
Yeah, I think it's in this area of what people are now calling building career pathways or fully linking up education, training, paid work experience, and the needs of the labor market. That's a continuum with a lot of moving parts and a lot of stakeholders. There's a lot to manage there. So I think that's a huge area for technical assistance and for new learning about what can work.
Helpful. Okay. Any other comments from your peers? Anyone? Okay. We will move on to Dorothy. What can I say about this amazing woman? After graduating from Harvard in 1963, she joined the civil rights movement through the Harlem Action Group, where she organized a summer preschool for children who had missed kindergarten. And Dorothy, about the same time, I was doing some summer work programming for ABCD in Boston, if you'll permit a personal note there. Dorothy then committed to Harlem, working there for 24 years. She began YouthBuild in East Harlem in 1978, serving as its director for 10 years. Then she expanded it throughout New York City, the state, the country, and now internationally. She's built an outstanding national nonprofit support center, creating a dynamic delivery system, and with local programs to create a democratic affiliated network in which directors and young people have an equal voice, which she's modeling today with her two co-panelists. She's committed not only to the health and impact of YouthBuild, but to building momentum, public will, and policy toward the elimination of policy. She serves on many, many boards and was thrilled to be invited to speak at the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights March on the Washington Mall, at which Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his I Have a Dream speech. Dorothy, you're on. Welcome.
Great. Thank you very much, Jack. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be your colleague for the past 50 years.
You didn't have to say that much. You didn't have to do the math.
Hey, why not? We're proud of our years. And thanks to everybody. I will start with just saying that YouthBuild is a comprehensive youth and community development model that started from the grassroots. It started from low-income young people answering the question, what would you want to change in your community if we could get you the resources to do it? And they said we would rebuild the abandoned buildings and create housing for the homeless. And they also said we would do a lot of other things, which we did in those early years. But when we replicated, we focused on the part which had been, which was construction. And this is the first building that the young people rebuilt in East Harlem. The picture was taken in 1979 before it was finished. It took a few years. This young man in the front that I'm pointing my arrow at, can you see where I'm pointing my arrow? This is, yes or no?
Not really.
Yeah, well, there's a young man in yellow in the front with his hand up. That's Victor Ortiz. He said, There's a lot of love in the Youth Action Program, and someday we're going to spread it around the world. And so I took my instruction. He then said, we're going to take it to the Bronx and Brooklyn and Queens and New Jersey. And so we did. And then, so once we had established that this worked so well in East Harlem, to listen to, respect the young people as a positive force in their neighborhood, if somebody would take seriously their ideas for change. And at the same time, they said to me, we're happy to rebuild the buildings in our neighborhood, but we also have to get something from it because we're poor, we need to get paid, and we need a place to live. So we'd like to live in the buildings when they're done, or at least get paid, and then we will do everything we can to rebuild our community and our lives. And so the design of YouthBuild splits half of the time is in a very supportive educational program, because all of the young people are young people who left high school without a diploma, so they need to get back on track for their education. The other half they spend building affordable housing, or now in partnership with the Department of Labor, we have a few other career tracks, which I'll add to. Here's a few of the pictures of the different types of housing that young people have built. Since we started in 78, in 84 we went citywide, in 88 we went national with support from the Mott Foundation, the Ford Foundation. In 90, the model authorized in public law, and so the comprehensive nature of the program with a balance of education, job training, community service, leadership development, and personal counseling was codified in law in 1992. Since then, 140,000 young people have built 30,000 units of affordable housing in over 260 local communities. And on this slide, it says since 1994, that's when the first federal money hit the streets. Now, in terms of the point on Andy's slide, that it's hard to find organizations who can deliver, there were 880 local community organizations that applied that first year for federal money when they saw this comprehensive program coming into being. Now, a typical YouthBuild program has 30 to 50 young people, small and intimate. They're all 16 to 24, all low income. Now, 40% are court involved, and a lot of them have been gang involved. A lot of them have been involved in dealing drugs. A lot of them are coming out of families who have a history of drug dealing. We have virtually no violence in our programs. We have no, metal detectors. We have young people who voluntarily leave the violence at the, outside the program once they discover that they are in a safe place so they don't have to worry about someone attacking them. And we'll come back to that. There are these, these are coming in gradually. So I mentioned education. I'm going to let LaShawn Amato, who is with me, who is a graduate of YouthBuild from 2009, who now has just earned his bachelor's degree at UMass and is studying for his master's in nonprofit management, share a little bit about his experience with the education component.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. So as far as the education in YouthBuild, first it starts off with the staff. The staff there are always willing to put in the extra time to tutor, to mentor, whatever they need, so it builds that trust and allows the student to be receptive to learn. Because a lot of times it takes a lot of effort to reignite that will for the student to even want to learn and move forward. So it starts with the staff, but the reason why it's so exciting is because we have project-based learning, so we will learn a lot of math concepts and then be able to apply it on the work site, which made it relevant and kind of made the connections. There was a focus on leadership and social justice, so we would do research on issues that affect the community, such as mortality rate due to drug use in the community, and things of that nature. And secondly, we had a college program where I was able to receive college instruction, college prep while I was still in the program, and introduced to the local community college where we had a partnership where I was able to participate in a college intro class. So the YouthBuild program prepared me for college. I took my very first college class on campus, thanks to YouthBuild, and that led on to many other opportunities.
Yeah, because he got an A, and so he never looked back.
Absolutely.
And then the other half, under the law, it's 50% education under the federally funded program, which is under the Department of Labor, and then 40% of the time of the students has to be in construction. Let Kirsi Soto, who's also a graduate of YouthBuild from 2009, speak to the construction side.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, although there were several females in the program that weren't interested in the construction, it played a very important role in not only the community, but I guess building up our strength and our knowledge around, construction and building and, houses. So we were able, at my local YouthBuild program, to remodel and what was the word that we used earlier?
Gut rehab.
Yeah, we did a gut rehab on a house, and that was 3 different apartments. So I guess being able to build these low-income houses for our community, and just driving past and seeing them being used and seeing the people living inside of them, it was very impactful on on the students there and the community also. So that played a really big role in the program.
Then, of course, there's a piece which is counseling. Every young person needs to think through their future, create a life plan. There's counselors in each program who do that with the students so that they're not just thinking about the short term, but thinking about the long term. I'm going to skip graduate resources for a minute. LaShawn spoke a little bit about it. At the center is an emphasis on leadership development. Part of our message to the young people is we're not just trying to get you to get your GED. We're not just trying to prepare you for a low-wage, entry-level job where obedience is the top value. We're saying your intelligence, your ideas, your vision for a better society and for improving your community matter, and your input in how we run this program to meet your needs will be built in to the way we operate, because you know more than we do about the reality that you face, and we'll work together. So Kirsis is going to speak a little bit about one piece of the leadership development, which is the engagement of young people in decision making.
So leadership is very important, and the leadership role in the dynamics behind it at the YouthBuild program were very different from just a regular high school, whereas the students in the program actually had a lot of say in what went on and what happened in the program and the changes that were being made. So I was a part of a policy committee at my local YouthBuild program, and we were able to interview the teachers that were coming in, and we were also a part of the hiring decision there. And that is not something that you're able to, or the young person is able to be a part of on an everyday basis.
Thank you, Chris.
Wow.
Forward. Principal factors, I'll move quickly. LaShawn spoke to some of the exciting curriculum. I do want to share that we do believe in the power of love coupled with opportunity to create an environment which contradicts and is the opposite of some of the negative environments have experienced in the past. So these are the basic values which we embrace. There's a pledge that every local program develops their own pledge that embrace these values, and the young people recite it every morning to internalize a whole new view of how they can operate. And I won't ask LaShawn and Kirsis to recite the pledge at the moment, their pledge, just for time. These are the outcomes. Now, remember, the young people are virtually all young people who left high school without a diploma. They're all low income, and roughly 40% have been court involved. But they have these outcomes. You can see it on your screen. And these are the long-term impacts which researchers have documented. Up to 7 years out, 75% still in college or employed at an average wage of $10 an hour. This return on investment, a minimum of $8.70, that was it goes much higher if it includes young people who have been convicted of any crimes. Now, this recidivism rate is important. The DOL data is captured 1 year after entry. The recidivism rate is 10% compared to a 25% national rate after 1 year. This other one, 28% after 3 years. I should actually, there's something a little wrong with that data. I should have changed it because they're different outcomes. So still low, but we'll move on. Now, these are the factors for success. Kersey spoke to the youth involvement in decision. Attention to outcomes is important. The fact that the Department of Labor values outcomes in their selection of grantees is important, but it's balanced by all of these other factors. It's not just your numbers. It's also your positive program culture, your effective partnership, et cetera. There are 173 programs now nationwide, and again, speaking to what Andy said about people being worried about finding and recruiting low-income young people who are out of school and out of work, every program gets an average of 4 times as many applicants as they can take, and they spend nothing on recruitment, on advertising. It's virtually all word of mouth, although they do distribute flyers in the neighborhood to make sure everyone knows. This is the grantee sites for the youth violence prevention program, and I just thought it would be useful to share with this audience. All of the ones in bold are ones that do have YouthBuild programs already in existence in your community, and some of them have had them in the past and don't have them because of lack of funds. We can come back to that if you're interested. Now, YouthBuild is authorized in the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act as a national program, and there are roughly $80 million of appropriations that the Congress has made. The only eligible entities are nonprofits or public entities. No for-profit corporations can apply for these funds, and they receive up to $1.1 million for 2 years. It's a wonderful delivery system, but it's too small. The Department of Labor requires a 25% non-federal match, and about half of them are currently funded by DOL YouthBuild. That should say DOL there. And the other half get allowed to use the YouthBuild name by YouthBuild USA, and they find their funding somewhere else because there isn't enough yet.
That's Andy. Right.
And this is a nice, a nice statement from different young people, different quotes over the years. I love them. YouthBuild is like a trampoline. It has vaulted me over so many obstacles.
I love it.
Like a windshield wiper. For the first time, I'm able to see where I am heading. YouthBuild is like an extraction machine. It finds gold among the garbage.
I love this, Dorothy, the way you're winding up. I'm going to wind you up with those wonderful statements from kids, and I just have to editorialize. This person is so rare. She goes from the street to policy. Just a quick collegial question here among us. And maybe both Kersey and LaShawn can answer this. So many kids in your program, youth in your program, have been at the other end of services, I'm sure, whether it's child welfare, mental health, school adjustment counseling, probation, et cetera, and yet you've woven in 2 extremely unusual concepts. Well, 3, the leadership, love, and service, giving back. And Kersey, I think you said something about when you did your work, quote, it had a big impact on the community. I want you just a little bit to reflect how important it was for you guys to be seen as givers, as contributors, as opposed to just takers.
Hello, everyone, again. So I know as far as, I guess, the students from YouthBuild, a lot of them come in with backgrounds from, with probation or in the foster care system or something. So I feel like they're looked at a little bit differently. They're looked at as delinquents or something. So, I mean, for the most part, when you think about community service, a lot of people think it is court-appointed or, your probation officer is making you do it or something. So it was really different for us. Every time we were able to go out into the community, whether it was picking up garbage from the side of the road or visiting a nursing home, to help out with it didn't feel like that for us. So the energy there and the love behind it, like it was natural. We weren't forced to go. So, the feeling there was just, we wanted to go do it. It was something that we looked forward to doing. So it was, obviously it was impactful for the community, but it did a lot of, like I said, a lot of students are coming in, whether they're even gang-related too. So just seeing them, go out into the community and do something that is, life-changing for the community, it also had an impact on us too, and the feelings behind it also.
Yeah. I just want to jump in.
Go ahead, LaShawn.
I'm sorry. So again, what you're saying is it went from a point of my community looking at me as labeling me as a criminal and a delinquent, juvenile, whatever you want to call it. With the leadership development and YouthBuild really gets you to open your eyes to be more civically engaged and really want to address the key issues that prevent people from moving up. So for instance, I went from being labeled as a juvenile justice delinquent to now, in the spirit of OJJDP, I serve on my state advisory group to enforcing the 4 provisions of JJDPA for the entire state and keeping kids out of jail and making sure that they're getting the services that they need. So I went from being labeled as delinquent, helping divert delinquents out of the system and having a long-lasting impact.
Absolutely fascinating to see how the skill building is packaged in such a very, very different way. Look, you guys, we got a bunch of questions related to what the 3 of you have stimulated, and I'm going to hold these and go to Jennifer at the Labor Department, and then we'll come back with the questions. And Jennifer, I have my introductory material for you right here. It was in front of me 1 minute ago. What did I do with it? Hang on. Jennifer.
Yep, I'm here. You want to skip it? I'm okay with skipping it. I'm just saying I'm Jennifer Kemp, and I'm with the Department of Labor Employment and Training Administration.
Yeah, but you have such a long list of exalted titles here. I want people to know who was on the phone. I'll tell you what. You start. I'll find it. Interrupt. Thank you for your time.
Well, that works for me. Actually, I have a couple colleagues who are nearby who are listening. Now I'm hearing an echo, so I'm hoping that they're hearing me say this and they're muting so others don't hear an echo. As I said, I want to first thank everyone for listening in and inviting me to participate in this conversation. I am Jennifer Kemp, and I am part of the Division of Youth Services at the Department of Labor. And Dorothy mentioned the connection between the Department of Labor and YouthBuild. I do want to take a moment to explain that there's a Division of Youth Services within the Office of Workforce Investment. And the Division of Youth Services has sort of three wings, I guess you could say. One that focuses on YouthBuild, and that's led up by a woman named Jen Smith. Another one focuses on the reintegration of ex-offenders. That is led up by Jackie Freeman. And then myself, Jennifer Kemp, I head up the Workforce Investment Opportunity Act work and a couple of other discretionary programs. So the three of us
while you're taking Jennifer, while you're taking a breath, I found it. You lead the Workforce and Innovation Opportunity Act, Youth Formula Program, Youth Career Connect, competitive grants. Previously, you led the Youth Policy Team for the U.S. Department of Labor's local grant programming, and you were staff, U.S. House Appropriations Committee, and Special Assistant to the Chairman of the President's Committee on Employment of People with Disabilities. And Jennifer has worked in the nonprofit, university, and corporate worlds. I'm apologizing for interrupting you, but I wanted everybody to know just what quality we have at the Department of Labor.
Well,
You're on.
That's great, and so you'll know really what quality you have, because as you were talking, I was trying to move my slides forward, and I can't. So maybe, Callie, could you move them forward for me? Thank you. One of the things we struggle with these days is our technology within the department. Sometimes the systems aren't updated maybe as readily as we would like it to be. So we, as was mentioned, there's a new legislation, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act. It was signed into law a little bit over a year ago, and we are readily and steadily working towards its implementation. It became effective in July 2015, and it's a really great opportunity for your population to get involved with the workforce system in ways that have maybe not been quite as easy in the past. So I'm going to try to move the slide. I can't. Can you move the slide for me again, please? Okay. So one thing to understand about WIOA, as we affectionately call it, is that it really is the bringing together of many partners in a way that hasn't been done before. On the list of this slide, you'll see a number of the partners appear. I think I want to really call your attention to the fact that there are 4 main titles to WIOA, and 3 of them really impact the work that the justice world is doing. The first title is where my program falls into place, and that's the Youth Formula Program, and that's approximately $820 million that goes from the federal level to the states to the locals, and I'll tell you a little bit more about how to get connected with that as I talk. But I don't want you to overlook Title II, which connects to the adult education side of things. And if you haven't heard a lot about Title II, I do want to let you know that there is some very specific information and opportunity in that related to court-involved youth and adults who are in the who are in the justice system around their education. So there's new funding there. I won't say new, but there's funding there that's really focused on your population. And the same goes for Title IV, which is rehabilitative services. And we know that there's a large overlap between youth who are involved in the justice system and disability. And so Title IV in particular has a big focus on serving youth who have disabilities. And so another thing for our local areas to think about is how to coordinate and partner across adult and vocational rehabilitation to make sure that the youth you're working with get connected to the resources that they really need to succeed. If you could advance my slide. So earlier there was a question around out-of-school youth. One of the big changes under WIOA is the focus on out-of-school youth. 75% of the funds have to be expended on out-of-school youth. And there has been, particularly early on, concern, where are we going to find these out-of-school youth? And out-of-school youth is defined as 16-year-olds to 24-year-olds, and there's a list of factors or eligibility criteria here. School dropout, and I really want to call your attention, as we said earlier, school dropout is just one of the factors. It's someone who's between 16 and 24, and basically not, at the moment, connected to work or education. And there are, unlike under WIA, where there is a big focus on out-of-school youth being low income, and I say big focus on low income, under WIA, 30% of the funds had to be expended on out-of-school youth. So now that we're at 75% under WIOA, it's a much bigger focus on out-of-school youth. Under WIA, the focus was more on low income for out-of-school youth, and under WIOA, the focus is more on out-of-school youth, and less in terms of the eligibility enrollment on low income. So earlier, what I was mentioning is that for youth who have been involved in the juvenile justice or the adult justice system as well, they will not have to demonstrate their low-income eligibility. So if they've been involved in the system, that's sort of a step that they might be able to skip when becoming connected to our program, so that you might be able to skip when helping someone come connected to the program. On the next slide, I talk about, in local youth. Again, here there's a focus on youth who have been involved in the justice system, but these are youth who are still currently enrolled in school. Now, one thing I should pause and mention is that because of the timing of when this law came into effect, we don't have final rules yet on how the program is going to be implemented. So you may have lots of questions about, well, how will this work, or how does that work? And at this moment, because there aren't final rules, I can't exactly answer all of your questions. But what I can tell you, and what I am telling you, is what's in the law as it's written. I will say that the final rules will be coming out in 2016, so at that point we could probably have a much richer conversation as we go along, because some things will be definitive at that point. All right, next slide.
How should they keep, Jennifer, updated on the progress of the regs?
You know, that is a good question, and we have a great resource. I mean, I think it's at the end of the slides, but www.deleta.gov/WIOA is where you can find everything and more than everything that you ever wanted to know about the legislation and how it connects to youth.
Thank you for letting me interrupt.
Yeah, no, that's great. So there are 14 program elements that a local area is required to have available for the youth who enroll in the program, but not every youth receives every element. The program is designed in such a way so that the youth develops an individualized service strategy with a case manager, and so that individualized service strategy, which is also going to be connected with career pathways that Andy mentioned earlier, is something that the youth should have a lot of input into designing. And so the program elements that the youth receive should align with what they're striving for in terms of their own goals. The program elements actually match nicely with a lot of the pieces that Dorothy was talking about earlier, but you will see that the 5 new ones are financial literacy, entrepreneurial skills, which I think is really critical for this population, labor market information, help with youth transitioning to post-secondary education and training, and then education offered concurrently within the same context as workforce preparation, which again really aligns with what the young folks that Dorothy had talking earlier, talking about how, you know, when I was working on something in the classroom, it aligned with what I was learning on the building site. So that's sort of idea of stuff being offered concurrently. There's also other program elements, including the mentorship, the leadership development, civic, positive behaviors. So a lot of those program elements are all based on what good youth development and youth leadership programs should look like. So if we could go to the next slide. Okay, so the other big change under WIOA is that 20% of the funds have to be spent on work experiences, which is a great opportunity for youth to get that real hands-on work experience that we are seeing. Even though the employment rates are going the way we want them for adults, they're very stagnant for youth. Youth are not often getting those first-time jobs that really, you know, make a difference in how we think about work as we get older and help with all those soft skills that employers tell us that they can't teach people and they want people to come in with. So we're seeing a lot more focus on that. And work experience is being defined as summer jobs, pre-apprenticeship work, which again I will say that YouthBuild is considered a pre-apprenticeship program, on-the-job training, internships. So it's the more hands-on type of work. Next slide, please. So I do want to tell you how to get connected, because I think, before I spoke to you all, I talked to Jackie, who's, again, a person who focuses on the population that you all work closely with. And she said, you know, one of the biggest things is how we connect you all as stakeholders to us. And while WIOA does not require youth standing youth councils like WIA did, now under WIOA it's youth standing committees, we are really looking forward to youth standing committees being a place that can reflect what is needed in the local area. And so when I've talked about youth standing committees, and unfortunately when I say youth standing committees, people like Dorothy are like, well, where are the youth? And unfortunately, youth are not a required partner, although we have encouraged their involvement. It's more about the systems players who will make an impact on the youth outcomes. So when we shared this with folks at the local level, what we've heard from a lot of people is great. We can involve court systems, we can involve judges, we can involve folks that weren't required under the youth councils, but are crucial people to make youth outcomes improve in communities. So I share the servicelandcure.org with you because if you type in your zip code, you'll be able to get connected with the workforce board in your area, and in many cases, the standing youth committee that's working in your area as well. So it's a very important resource for you all. And I think my next couple of slides are just, if you could advance the slides, a way to look at career pathways, which I won't get into, but it's there. For those of you who want to ask more questions, we can have that conversation later. And then the next slide is my next move. This is a great tool if you're not already using it with the youth that you work with. It gives you up-to-the-moment data about how much a person makes in an area in a particular field. So for instance, a lot of people say they want to be a rock star. Well, you can look up and see how much a musician works in your area, how many hours they're actually working, and what their average pay is. And it's really fascinating for the youth to realize that in Wisconsin there might be musicians, but they're only working 18 hours a week, and they're making $20 an hour. So it's just a good tool. It gives a lot of the standard career development assessments, and it helps you think about like careers, similar careers that they might want to explore.
Jennifer, does that slide contain a picture of what is? I find that absolutely fascinating, and I might plug into it for my next career. But apart from that, is there any prospective slide in terms of what is on the economic horizon and what local folks involved in Work for Kids might think about, like healthcare or whatever, and what particular economic indices say? Don't waste your time with this group.
Yeah, well, that's certainly important. Career pathways. Now, this is a great tool because you can type in you can do this as a provider too, and this will get you the tools that the department has, and not only will it say what the economic look is and what the hot areas are and the not so hot areas, but it also connects you with the needed credentials, and so it's a very rich tool. I don't have that slide in this deck, but it's a great tool, and if you Google my next move, it's also available in Spanish for folks who feel more comfortable navigating in that language as well. So maybe I should stop there. I think I have a couple more slides that are just more resources, but I talked a lot. Here is to the earlier point here, so you can continue to learn about WIOA, not only the Department of Labor's tools, but also the Department of Education's as well. Because we're working like all the time with them. I feel like I know them better than my family sometimes. Right.
Wonderful. Jen, thank you very, very much. Questions from you all coming up. I'll lead off with this one, and it's both to YouthBuild and I think to you, Jen. Work with tribes. Is there a YouthBuild site in the tribal community? It's from Anna Morangi. And also how youth have fared who've been in child welfare, in the child welfare system, and that was to you, Dorothy, but tribal question and then kids in the child welfare system.
If I could drop in with the tribal question just real quickly, there is, within the Office of Workforce Investment, there is a unit, a division that focuses on tribes, and under WIOA there was a whole reauthorization of a Native American program, which does have a small amount of money that focuses on Native American youth on reservations. So if someone's particularly interested in knowing more about that program, I could certainly connect them to the team of folks that work on that.
Dorothy?
Yes, there are tribal YouthBuild programs. The tribal organizations are eligible to apply to the Department of Labor. They're also eligible to get authorized by YouthBuild, licensed by YouthBuild to start a YouthBuild program. There have been a number of them over the years, and I am not sure. Right now, I think there are 4 or 5, but I can't tell you which tribes off the top of my head.
Okay,
And
we'll get it. Go ahead.
The second question about how young people who've been in various child welfare have fared. We don't have separate data, but a large percent of the young people have been in some kind of, many of them have been in foster care. At least 10%. When I ask a group in the room, their hands go up, and many in other forms of service. And they seem, YouthBuild is all in one place what they were looking for, and so they do very well there. And maybe, I don't know if Christine wants to add anything.
So I spent all of my teenage years in the foster care system, and I signed myself out at the age of 19, and my previous social worker was the one that actually guided me into YouthBuild. But it was growing up in the foster care system, especially when you're bouncing from house to house or city to city, it can be very difficult when you're signing yourself out. Where I was 19 signing myself out. I didn't have an ID. I had no work history, and I didn't have an education. So, luckily for YouthBuild, being there, I was able to gain all of that back. They were able to kind of guide me into the adulthood that I had missed out on while in the foster care system. So it was a really beneficial and great program for me.
Oftentimes, young people will come in YouthBuild and they'll say, I came here looking for a GED, and I'm glad that they paid me a stipend, but what I really found here was like a family, and it was the adults and the peers caring about me in ways I hadn't experienced before. So there's a kind of foundation.
You and LaShawn are going to be such gifts to others because of your experience, and I'm sure people who have been through child welfare, I know when I was Commissioner of Youth Services in Massachusetts, about 75% of my kids have been in child welfare. So what inspiration you can give to others is awesome. A question that is implied, and it's both for you, Jen and Dorothy, what local systems are essential for sustaining these wonderful efforts? I mean, the federal money doesn't go on forever. What are the absolutely critical partners that you've got to have this kind of work woven into the civic fabric?
Jen, you want to go first, or you want me to?
Dorothy, I think it's always helpful to hear from someone who's done it to scale the way you have, because that's, something that we're missing sometimes. We have great programs that don't get taken to scale quite like yours. So I will let you go first.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd say that we shouldn't write off federal money, and that it should be all of our jobs to advocate for more federal money for everything that's working, because we did a study, we commissioned Civic Enterprise, run by John Bridgeland a few years ago, to do a study on what would it take to reconnect 1 million young people a year through expansion of all of the existing federal pathways. So that range from adult basic education as the least expensive to Job Corps as the most expensive residential full-time program. And there were 440,000 current opportunities, and that we could get to 1 million with an additional $6 billion. That should be a priority nationally, politically, because it is ridiculous to leave 6 million young people out of school and out of work when we have an array of solutions. And YouthBuild itself, that 80 million should be 1 billion. It should be 50,000 young people, and then check out and see if we have enough organizations capable of doing a great job. And if so, and if you still have 4 times as many young people applying as spaces, then take it to another big growth and check out each of the programs that exist to make sure they have integrity, that they're authentic, that they have good outcomes, that they're not wasting money, and then take them to scale. That's at the federal level. At the local level, YouthBuild programs have sustained themselves with public education money. They get average daily attendance funds sometimes by becoming either a charter school or an extension of the public school system, like New York City has something a special school district where they provide the teachers free of charge. They have obtained CDBG money, which is very flexible HUD money for whatever the city decides is most important in anti-poverty development. We think that there should be state funds diverted from the prisons to reentry programs certified by the state in the same way the state certifies charter schools. Let's certify nonprofit reentry programs and which meet certain criteria and divert that overspending on incarceration to really good reentry programs.
How about public? Nellie Nunez asked Dorothy whether county health departments can help with this effort. You mentioned HUD and the others and prison diversion money. How about, do county health play a role in this at all?
They can if they choose to. They haven't. Now, on the other hand, the city council in New York and the state government in Massachusetts put a couple $1 million into their budget for the YouthBuild programs throughout the city and throughout the state that supplements the federal money. And they even give more, to make sure the programs can sustain themselves. So making sure that mayors who are taking seriously Opportunity Youth and the My Brother's Keeper initiative are putting some of their flexible tax levy money behind these programs. That's a local advocacy challenge. It takes time and money to persuade people where to put their money, but it's worth doing because when you pay attention, they do it. And there is a national group that I want to bring to your attention called Opportunity Youth Network, run by the Forum for Youth Investment and Aspen, and YouthBuild is active in it. It's brought together corporations, government, and nonprofit entities and young people. There's a national group of low-income young people called Opportunity Youth United, which is joined forces with Opportunity Youth Network.
Just one more question in this story.
Before you leave this question, can I just pepper you with a couple more thoughts? Because I certainly agree with what Dorothy was saying, and we're active partners in the Forum for Youth Investment ourselves. I think, federal money has definitely been shrinking. And there are some states, like Minnesota has been able to secure separate funding for both YouthBuild and the WIOA formula programs through active work within their state. And I think the other thing, which is maybe perhaps a little bit tricky, but with WIOA, one thing that sort of surprised us related to the financial literacy program element is that we have tons of federal partners who are in the banking side of things, Department of Treasury, FDIC, Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Federal Reserve. All these partners are very interested in working with us because they see youth as an important part of the inclusion banking focus and really helping banks focus on getting youth making good choices and not going to payday lenders and that type of stuff. So I think that sometimes the folks who think about creative ways to engage different partners, I would definitely encourage that. And I also think, as my time in this field is about 20 years, and certainly evaluation is much more important than it ever has been before, and foundations can be key in helping fund those evaluations, as well as universities that are in a local area. So I would just offer those as other resources.
That's fascinating. A couple questions, putting them together. Sathamali Kessi asks, how much are the YouthBuild stipends? And Nick, I think it's Kisman, asks, will that get in the way, that stipend get in the way of receiving public assistance? So let's keep these answers fairly quick because we got a bunch of them and we got about 12 minutes.
I'll try to be shorter. It's about $250 a week stipend. It's equivalent to minimum wage for the time they spend building affordable housing and less for the time they spend in school, just transportation and money, and lunch. And it does not interfere with receiving public benefits. We've worked that through in the courts. Fantastic.
Dorothy Donroe asked whether you provide local training for these programs, specifically for YouthBuild, and I might, Dorothy, you're out there somewhere, I might add to your question, some of the principles in your program, do you train also in that? And it might not be a YouthBuild program, but for those doing youth employment work, principles that you hold dear, no matter whether they're doing construction or welding or x-ray technician work. So both questions. Local training, do you do it? How do they get it? And does this apply just to YouthBuild or generically to successful youth employment programs?
Local training for people who don't yet have funding, we will do it on a fee-for-service basis. Similarly, we're interested and available to non-YouthBuild programs for training in principles and practices. We also do training for those who are already operating on a national basis. We bring people together. We do some of it for and under contract with the Department of Labor for their grantees, and additional training for others who apply to us to be certified affiliates.
Nina Nolan asks, what does an effective partnership agreement look like? What are sort of its key elements, Dorothy?
Well, if it's with a college, you want to make sure that the college has resources to provide ongoing support to the young people. So LaShawn, who had to leave the room, but if he were here, he would explain that when he went to the community college, there was a full-time person on the community college campus who was dedicated to all of the YouthBuild students who went there. Made it much more likely for them to complete and finish. But partnerships, you know, they're built each one for what you're trying to establish. We have a lot of partnerships with Habitat for Humanity because YouthBuild students build a lot of their housing, and so figuring out, well, who pays for what, and, you know, who's on site when, and et cetera. You just have to figure it out and make sure you've really agreed to all of it in advance.
Mm-hmm. This is probably a question that's music to your ears, Dorothy. Nick Kiernan asks whether YouthBuild accepts donations.
We do accept donations. You can you can go on our website, youthbuild.org, and there's a big donate button, and you can send it. And believe me, the donations from individuals play a critical role in keeping this whole system working, because there's a lot of things you cannot use public money for, especially advocacy. And so individual donations make it all work.
Andy, if you're still on, I know you had another call. I would like from your end to reflect how some of these successful YouthBuild principles have been infused into other employment initiatives throughout the country.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Well, one of the most direct lines of transmission has been learning from what Dorothy referred to, you know, if employment and training and YouthBuild specific funds are temporarily limited until the advocacy works that Dorothy is helping lead, then the question is, what kind of entitlement funding might young people qualify for that would allow a program to help better meet young people's needs? And so that search in YouthBuild led to the per pupil funding from state governments for education, and quite a large number of conservation corps programs across the country have emulated YouthBuild in switching their program model over to provide more education time, draw down per pupil funding, and effectively blend that with employment-focused funding. So that's one of the single best examples I could point to.
When you're dealing with companies and you're dealing with these folks in YouthBuild and some of your employment programs across the country, Andy, what is the nature of your work with those who would hire some folks who one would consider not traditional employees? What do they need to know, and how do you support them?
Yeah, another good question, and I think this is where there's the Grads of Life campaign and related efforts are breaking new ground these days. But it's actually a turnabout is fair play situation where the employers might need, at minimum, some briefing, if not some training themselves about to revise the assumptions they may bring into the process about what young people are like and what they can do and how reliable they are. Basically responding to all the charges that people might level that would lead them, without trying it out, not to hire young people. So that's what we're seeing more of these days.
Dorothy, you want to comment on that? Support the employers, and go ahead. And it relates to not only the work habits of the kids, who may not have had role models who work, but also the employers. So what support do you give to the employers?
I don't think we're as good at that as we are at other things. We have been working with union apprenticeships, and so we've tried to prepare the young people specifically with the union curriculum that they've developed. We also use industry-recognized credentials. But recently, I don't know if you noticed, the Starbucks initiated 100,000 Opportunities Initiative, where they brought together 39 employers.
Yes.
And in that context, we have brought together the Opportunity Youth United spokespeople to meet with the CEOs and to share with them the fact that, they need the employer to understand some of the challenges. They wildly appreciate the support for college that Starbucks gives. They would like to have, HR staff who understand the transportation challenges or the the social challenges, so that young people could have somebody to talk to. Life is still tough when you're in poverty, and so having someone on site who understands that and is willing to give you an ear and a hand makes a difference.
Jennifer, can you do you want to weigh in on this? Whether any of the labor money can go to support employers in some way?
Yeah, so actually there is not necessarily the youth money, although the youth money could be used creatively at the local level for that, but certainly through our American Job Centers, our one-stop centers, there's a big focus there on employers. And so, yes, and you would, the one-stop locator slide that I had up, that's where you could connect to someone locally if you wanted to connect with local employers. It's a great opportunity.
Well, I'm for sure going to get a Starbucks coffee this afternoon to help us support that. A question about summer work and momentum. Every single National Forum site and most cities in the country have very robust summer work programs. I think Baltimore, after its difficulty, had 8,000 kids working this summer. How do we capitalize on that momentum going into the fall and winter? Because there is a commitment, there's a base, a lot of private sector money, a lot of municipal energy. How do you use that as momentum to support what you've got going? So, any of you can weigh in on that.
Yeah, well, and I think, this is Jennifer, I think that's a great other point that I wanted to bring up when we were talking about other funders. Most of those large summer youth employment programs are not funded by the Department of Labor, but rather funded by cities and local employers. And every year we scramble, and like April, oh no, the summer is coming. It's like, the sky is falling when we knew that summer was coming. So to the extent that we can plan now for that and piggyback on all the work that's being done, and particularly around some of the challenges that we had this past summer in cities, it's really critical and something that we're seeing here. And I think one of the ways, one of the leverages of the WIOA is that summer youth used to be a standalone program element, but now it's part of the bigger work experience conversation. So to the extent that local areas are having conversations around how to spend 20% of their WIOA funds on work, summer should be part of that conversation. And I do want to say, I think as we serve more older youth, summer is important, but I think that year-round engagement is equally important for
Absolutely.
connected youth. So that's
Yeah, yes, I was thinking of it more in terms of the momentum and the energy that's focused around it and how to bottle that, capture it, and keep it going into the year. Dorothy, on YouthBuild grants, I'm not sure this was exactly answered. They go out annually through competitive process managed by DOL. I mean, how does that happen? And we've got about 2.5 minutes to go.
The Department of Labor puts out an RFP, and people all over the country respond. And there's usually several hundred applicants, and there's usually 70 to 75 grantees. If there were more funding, there would be more grantees. Jen, does that cover it?
And when does it go out?
Yes, I think that about sums it up. And the way folks can learn more about that is through www.dol.gov. And if you type in grants, you can actually see a forecast of what kinds of grants opportunities the department will have. And again, we didn't talk about this part of our office earlier, but the reintegration of ex-offenders unit has several grants that come out every year that are focused on getting youth connected to employment who have been involved in the justice system. So that's another good funding source if you're looking at ways to increase the work opportunities in your local area.
Thank you all. You guys have been absolutely fabulous. I wish we could do this for another hour or two. Dorothy and your two young folks, and I would love to follow up with both of them to get their stories. Jennifer, Andy, keep it up. You've done a real service to the nation here, and I think DSG is going to be writing some of this up to get it out to the network. So hats off to the 5 of you, and to all your questions, and to Jeroma for helping make this all happen. Okay? Take care, all.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.